Welcome and good morning. I'm Josh Coyote, today's worship associate. Today is our November 27th, 2022 in-person and online service. Reverend Kevin Carson, Vic Allen, Elizabeth Coyote, and I bring you this service from the church sanctuary. So welcome this morning, this day, and this opportunity to be together in community. We have some weekly announcements. If you're a online live stream viewer, we ask you to sign in to the chat box so we know who's joining us online. We will be having sorrows, concerns, and joys after time for all ages. We'll read those that come in that have been put in the basket, and that any that come in the chat. And we will be passing the basket later, but if you're online, there's also, our website has a PayPal donation and as well as an address to send in checks. And I believe Victoria McDonald, our president, has some announcements.
When some of us cleaned out the garage last spring, we found a brand new snowblower, and we don't use it. Most of us, well, it's beyond me. I got a new computer and I couldn't turn it on. Anyway, so I had to go back. So the snowblower, the board has given approval to sell the snowblower. I would prefer to sell it to a Unitarian, but that's not a requirement. However, I have no idea what to sell it for. No idea. I sort of just look past those snowblowers when I go into a hardware store. So I need someone, a woman or a man, who has an idea what it's worth. It's never been used. It's gasoline powered. Somebody said we need to know if it works, and it's like, but then we'll be pouring gasoline and oil into it, and let's just sell it as is. So if anybody after church could go down to the garage with me quickly and say, I think it's worth $800, I think it's worth $200, I think it's worth $3,000, I would really appreciate that. I'd prefer the $3,000 estimate. And then we were going to do the tree decorating this week, and I just thought, this is sort of a weird week. We had, some of us might not be able to even stand on a ladder after Thanksgiving. And so next week, we're going to haul up the tree that we actually have had for 2 years, and Bill Cohn fixed the lighting. Last year also, Elizabeth said we're going to put socks on there. Wasn't it a sock tree? But we got other things also. So when you go through the stores and you're buying stuff for yourself and your family, think about people that might need socks, little ones, big ones, or gloves. I think that's it, although I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting something. But anyway, right after the service, please help me with the snowblower. Thanks.
Now we move into the sacred time of our service. As I ring this peace bowl 3 times, take deep breaths and relax so we can move into worship. For this moment in time, let go of your anxieties, fears, and worries. Be in this moment. We will now read our church's covenant. It is printed in the over service, so feel free to read along with us. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We will now be lighting our chalice. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift.
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning comes from the holy man Black Elk of the Oglala Lakota Nation. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and round about beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in a sacred manner the shapes of all things in the Spirit, and the shape of all shapes, as they must live together as one being. And I saw the sacred hoop of my people was one of the many hoops that made one circle, wide as daylight and as starlight, and in the center grew one mighty flowering tree to shelter all the children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was holy, but anywhere is the center of the world. I invite you to rise and body your spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, number 67, We Sing Now Together.
Now sing we together our song of thanksgiving, rejoicing in goods which the ages have wrought, for life that enfolds us and helps and heals and holds us and leads beyond the goals which our forebears once sought. We sing of the freedoms which martyrs and heroes have won by their labor, their sorrow, their pain, the oppressed befriending, our ampler hopes defending. Their death becomes a triumph, they died not in vain. We sing of the prophets, the teachers, the dreamers, designers, creators, and workers and seers, our own lives expanding, our gratitude commanding. Their deeds have made immortal their days and their years. We sing of community now in the making, in every far continent, region, and land, with those of all races, all times and names and places. We pledge ourselves in covenant firmly to stand.
Today's Time for All Ages is entitled This is Our Home, But Not Just Ours, adapted from a poem by Laura Bogle. We gather here to remember this is our home, but not just ours. This land we live on, this water we drink, this air we breathe, these old mountains that hold us steady to our ground, these forests that give us their healing green, these flowers that give us their beauty and fragrance, these fields that give us our daily bread, these stars that show us our place. The desert and the tame backyards, all of it our home. We remember the ancestors who have lived on this land and who have shaped it. The Shoshone, the Bannock, the settlers, the mountaineers, the farmers, the hunters, the immigrants, the artists, the families, the explorers, the business people, the engineers, the builders, the scientists, the teachers, the workers, the leaders. We inherit their choices. We honor the animals and creatures that have made their home in this land, the ones here now and the ones that used to be here. We envision the future generations who will live on this land and let their voices fill our hearts. We gather here to remember this is our home, but not just ours. The end.
As we leave this friendly place, love give light to every face. May the kindness which we learn light our hearts till we return.
This is a special time in our congregation where each of us has an opportunity to share major events in our lives, our joys, our concerns, and our sorrows, so we can all be uplifted by our UU community. As I read these that were given to us, the minister will light a candle. From Karen Croft, a concern. Sending love and hugs to all who have lost friends and loved ones these past 2 years. From Karen Croft, a joy. For people to put good energy out to the universe by doing good deeds and just being there for each other. A joy from Elizabeth Coyote. She has been invited to the board of the UU Women's Federation, and she accepted, and the first meeting is this week. Anonymous. Rock is not the devil's work, it's magical and rad. Joy from Victoria. We have snow. Yes, it causes problems, but our state needs snow. And a joy from Roby Cartmel. Happy birthday to Bob, whose birthday is Tuesday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Bob. Happy birthday to you. We light one more candle for all the sorrows, concerns, and joys we hold in our hearts and are not yet ready to share at this time. Know we lift up our love for you, and we are all in this together.
Our reading this morning comes from the book The Web of Meaning by Jeremy Lent. The reason a worldview is important is that it imbues virtually every aspect of the way people think, what they value, and how they act without them even realizing it. Worldviews lead cultures to respond to their reality in fundamentally contrasting ways. If you believe that all beings are family, you'll treat them in a different way than if you think the natural world is a resource to be exploited. If you think other humans are inherently cooperative, you'll approach a person differently than if you think that ultimately everyone is selfish and competitive. If you presume that technology can fix our biggest problems, you won't feel the need to consider the underlying systems that caused those problems to arise in the first place. In my earlier book, The Patterning Instinct, I looked at major worldviews through history, investigating how cultures structured patterns of meaning into the universe from humanity's earliest days in nomadic hunter-gatherer bands to modern times. One overarching theme emerged. A culture's worldview shapes its values, and those values shape history. By the same token, the values according to which we conduct our lives today will shape the future. Ultimately, the direction of history is determined by the dominant culture's worldview. A worldview that could foster humanity's long-term flourishing on a healthy planet is a worldview of integration, one that identifies the unifying principles that flow through all things while celebrating the differences that lead to the richness of our lived experience. It is a worldview that links together scientific findings in recent decades from such diverse fields as evolutionary biology, cognitive neuroscience, and complexity theory, showing how they affirm profound insights from the world's great wisdom traditions, such as Buddhism, Taoism, and traditional knowledge from indigenous peoples around the world. An offering to support the mission of this church will now be given and gratefully received. Sometime in our childhood, most of us in America were taught the story of the first Thanksgiving. Maybe, like me, you made hand paper turkeys to decorate your homeroom, or you made construction paper pilgrim hats or native headdresses, or even dressed up as pilgrims and Indians to reenact the mythic story of that harvest feast in 1621 in Plymouth Colony. Thanksgiving has been a beloved national holiday since 1863, and it was already being celebrated decades earlier in New England. It has become part of our national identity. And though there's some truth to the story, we now know that the story is more complex than the Plymouth colonists inviting the local Native Americans over for a peaceful harvest feast to give thanks. I have no doubt the Pilgrims were thankful for the bounty of the harvest that year, since their numbers had been decimated by starvation and disease since they arrived. And they were probably grateful for the assistance of local Native Americans who taught them how to grow corn and other native crops, especially in the poor soil and challenging environment of coastal New England. There was a harvest feast celebrated by the colonists sometime in October or November that year. And apparently during the revelry, there was a shooting contest, and the sound of gunfire attracted the Wampanoag chief Massasoit to investigate, along with around 90 of his warriors. With tensions always high between the English, the Wampanoags, and the Narragansetts in the area, and the looming possibility of an encounter with the Spanish or French, the sound of gunfire could mean somebody was shooting at somebody else, so it would be prudent to confirm the source. According to an account by Edward Winslow, when Massasoit and his warriors suddenly dropped in on the Plymouth colonists, they were invited to stay and feast, but it may have been more of a diplomatic gesture than simple hospitality. As for the menu, Winslow reports many fowl were supplied by the colonists in addition to vegetables and seafood, and 5 deer were provided by Massasoit's men. The feast lasted for 3 days. I suppose we should be thankful that we only feast for a day, unless you count leftovers, though nowadays Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, Cyber Monday, and Giving Tuesday have begun to morph the holiday into a week-long celebration of capitalism. I think I will stick with giving thanks over a single festive meal. I think it is important to note that a tense peace did remain between the Plymouth colonists and the Wampanoag for over 50 years after they arrived, though there were some small conflicts on occasion that were inevitable by such a clash of cultures. By the time the Pilgrims had landed on the coast of Massachusetts, the so-called New World had been known to Europeans for over a century, at least along the eastern part of North America and parts of Central and South America. Coastal fishermen and traders had routinely interacted with Native Americans and sometimes kidnapping them and taking them back to Europe. Tisquantum, the English-speaking member of the Patuxet tribe who the Pilgrims miraculously encountered, was among them. By 1620, European conquest and settlement was still very limited outside of Mexico and South America. The inevitable exchange of diseases, which was lopsided in favor of the Europeans, along with the difference in technology, the famous impact of guns, germs, and steel described in Jared Sparks' excellent book, had already decimated Native American populations and disrupted social order. Before European contact, there were probably at least 100 million people living in the Americas, though historians can only estimate. And it is likely that over 90% were dead within a few decades, mostly from European diseases that originated in domesticated animals. When the Pilgrims first landed on the tip of Cape Cod and later moved to the mainland, they found mostly deserted villages wiped out by disease. In their minds, of course, this pre-prepared land was just more proof of God's providence. For Massasoit, faced with the decimation of his own Wampanoag tribe, the arrival of these strange new people presented an opportunity for an alliance to strengthen his position against the Narragansetts and other stronger tribes nearby. This partnership lasted until after Massasoit's death in 1661, but in 1675, one of Massasoit's sons, Metacomet, led a rebellion against the colonial invaders that lasted for over 2 years, leaving tens of thousands of colonists and Native Americans dead. The bloodiest war per capita in American history. Wherever Europeans encountered Native Americans, there was little regard for their culture, knowledge, or religion, especially after the decline of the large cities such as Tenochtitlan in Mexico and Cahokia in present-day Illinois. Tribes such as the Wampanoags, Micmacs, Pequots, and Narragansetts the Pilgrims encountered were seen as primitive savages, children of nature at best, and minions of Satan at worst. When the Crown granted the charter for the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1629, their seal included an image of a Native American holding a bow saying, "Come over and help us," emphasizing the missionary goals of the new colony. The words have been removed, but the current Great Seal of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts still includes the Native American. All but a rare few Europeans had any appreciation for the wisdom indigenous peoples could offer. It is a testament to the desperation and ignorance of the Pilgrims that they were willing to learn Native American agricultural practices in order to survive. From our 21st century perspective, we know that Native Americans did not need European help at all, and in fact, suffered greatly because of colonialism, one of the greatest one-sided culture clashes in human history. As Jeremy Lent describes in The Web of Meaning, the relentless drive of European settlers to conquer the native lands of the Americas was as ravenous as the mythical Wendigo demon of Native American lore, a creature whose defining characteristic was the more it consumed, the more ravenous it became. And a bite from the Wendigo infected its victim with the same insatiable hunger. Europeans did bring to the table millennia of human knowledge about science, philosophy, and the arts, and a variety of domesticated animals and new technologies. But the inevitable sharing of diseases, slavery, and occasional deliberate genocide came with it. As for the native contribution to the exchange, the European diet became much richer with a virtual cornucopia of New World grains, fruits, and vegetables cultivated for thousands of years, especially corn, potatoes, and, for better or worse, tobacco. Some Europeans romanticized the childlike innocence of the Native Americans, living in some sort of Eden-like natural paradise, the so-called noble savage of their imaginations. But even the most enlightened Europeans assumed that assimilation into European culture, society, and, of course, the Christian religion would be the best future for America's native population. It was obvious to them that the worldview of Plato, Descartes, and the Enlightenment was superior to native savagery and superstition. It is only in recent decades, when we are faced with multiple ecological crises and the spiritual malaise that comes with them, that we are beginning to re-examine and consider the value of traditional wisdom from indigenous people around the world. We are starting to appreciate the potential of traditional ecological knowledge, or tech, in relation to conservation and developing more sustainable practices for agriculture. And there is renewed interest in the spiritual traditions that sustained indigenous societies. The Wampanoags taught the Pilgrims to fertilize their soil with dead alewives to greatly increase their yields. And if we are willing to set aside our modern Western arrogance and listen to and engage with the remnant of indigenous people who remain, we can benefit from generations of similar wisdom gained through observation and practice. And to truly understand their wisdom, we need to appreciate the spiritual context which permeates their lives. This doesn't mean we all need to start practicing some kind of indigenous spirituality, but as I talked about a few months ago in one of my sermons, I think we can explore these ancient traditions and wisdom in a way that will deepen our own sense of sacred connection to the earth and what it means to be part of the interdependent web of all existence. The dominant worldview today is the fantasy of unlimited economic growth that will ultimately lift everyone, even the poorest among us, through globalization, despite the obvious limitation of the Earth's finite resources. And when the environmentalists challenge this worldview due to its impact on the planet, its proponents like to point to the idea of green growth, which is somehow infinitely sustainable, and they assume any problems that arise, such as, let's say, climate change and mass extinctions, can be solved by technology. But do we really think we can tame such a Wendigo and clean up its messes with technological innovations alone? That is a huge leap of faith based on a string of untenable assumptions. The scientific revolution, which began in Europe and flourished in America, has without question improved the material lives of most people in the world through clean water, electricity, medicine, and countless other scientific advances. But it has come at a great cost to many, and the side effects are becoming manifest in the world and cannot be ignored. What we need is a new worldview that is more objective about the human exploitation of the earth, one that integrates a diversity of ideas and approaches from all sorts of fields, including the best of modern and traditional wisdom. It is a worldview that dares to break down the artificial barrier between a scientific understanding of the world and a spiritual appreciation of our place in the more than human world. Such a worldview would value balance and harmony over competition and the accumulation of wealth. And it would emulate the symbiotic reciprocal relationships of nature. It could find inspiration along these lines in the ancient wisdom of Taoist and Confucian sages. It would de-objectify the more than human world as indigenous peoples have understood for untold millennia, working to create a more ecological civilization. As Jeremy Lent writes, the overriding objective of an ecological civilization would be to create conditions for all humans to flourish as part of a thriving, living earth. A fundamental precept would be the recognition of fractal flourishing. The well-being of each person is fractally related to the health of the larger world. Individual health relies on societal health, which relies in turn on the health of the ecosystem in which it is embedded. It is based on symbiosis, wherein each party gains from a reciprocal relationship. In human terms, this translates into foundational principles of fairness and justice, ensuring that the efforts and skills people contribute to society are rewarded equitably. Recognizing that the flourishing of the system as a whole requires the health of its constituent parts, an ecological civilization would foster individual dignity, providing the conditions for everyone to live in safety and comfort, with universal access to adequate housing, competent health care, and quality education. In a fractal design of an ecosystem, harmony arises not through homogeneity, but through each organism contributing to the whole by pursuing its own fulfillment and well-being. Accordingly, an ecological civilization would celebrate diversity, recognizing that its overall health depended on different groups. When you think about it, this idea of fractal flourishing seems so obvious it hardly needs stating. But we can get so caught up in our own sense of individuality that it's easy to forget. And we are certainly a long way from the kind of ecological civilization that Lent envisions. Perhaps you think Lent is being overly optimistic or utopian in his thinking, but societal change is not linear. And here again we can look to some indigenous societies which were much more aligned with the ecological model. And with more than 8 billion human beings now living on Earth, and with a capacity for communicating between each other greater than at any time in our history, there is certainly enough diversity and to find a creative way into an ecological civilization of the future. We cannot replace the dominant worldview overnight, but I have hope that a sustained effort can begin to bring about the changes we need until we find ourselves at a tipping point and rapid changes flow forth. A darker possibility is that catastrophic climate change will force us to change course more quickly, though the human and non-human cost would be tragic. Either way, the wisdom of indigenous peoples can help us reorient and reconnect with the earth if we are willing to listen. It is a complementary way of knowing that we can integrate into a new worldview that reflects the reality of our world in broader terms. Alewives and corn were just the beginning. We have so much more to learn. So on this Thanksgiving weekend, let us give thanks for the wisdom of all those who have gone before us, all the diverse contributions to the human story from many cultures. I am so very grateful for the benefits of modern science when I need medical care or simply enjoy the convenience of using my cell phone. I am in wonder of the continuous revelations about the cosmos I see every day from science, especially the latest images from the Webb Space Telescope and the updates on missions like the Artemis 1 Orion journey to the moon. And I am also filled with joy and wonder and a profound sense of responsibility, seeing the world as a great web of relations, living among brother trees and sister animals, all of us in a beautiful, evolving dance of life. I invite you now to rise in body and spirit again and join in singing our closing hymn, number 69, Give Thanks.
Give thanks for the corn and the wheat that are reaped, for labor well done, and for barns that are heaped, for the sun and the dew and the sweet honeycomb, for the rose and the song and the harvest brought home. Give thanks for the mills and the farms of our land, for craft and the strength in the work of our hands, for the beauty our artists and poets have wrought, for the hope and affection our friendships have brought. Give thanks for the homes that with kindness are blessed, for seasons of plenty and well-deserved rest, for our country extending from sea unto sea, for ways that have made it a land for the free.
Our closing words are a Sioux prayer from the book Earth Prayers. Grandfather, Great Spirit, all over the world the faces of living ones are alike. With tenderness they have come up out of the ground. Look upon your children, that they may face the winds and walk the good road to the day of quiet. Grandfather, Great Spirit, fill us with light. Give us the strength to understand and the eyes to see. Teach us to walk the soft earth as relatives to all that live.
We will now extinguish the chalice with the following words from Elizabeth Sell Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Now for our postlude.